Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be back with another young Indian, part of the Voice of the Young series. Right now, we have with us Yash Mathur. Let's listen to him. Over to you, Yash.
Hi, sir. Good evening and a good morning to you. It's late in India and a very early morning for you to connect over. So I'll give you a brief introduction about myself, right? So my name is Yash Mathur. I work for Morgan Stanley in India as a wealth management risk advisor. I started up my career by studying at the Christ University in Bangalore. I was a cohort passing batch of 2020, sorry, and I did study my economic honors from there. And post the stint to that, I joined JP Morgan Chase in India, where I was overlooking their AML business. So I was developing, quantitative models for AML compliance and risk for them. And after that stint, I moved to the corporate and investment
Just a
banking vertical.
second. Not many of us know what is AML, so please tell us.
Okay, so AML stands for anti-money laundering.
Yeah.
So post the 2008 crisis, there were norms taken out by the Service Exchange Commission of the US. So they were Dodd-Frank norms, they were Basel norms, which were very specific to the European continent, and there are different norms established by Indian bodies as well. So we had clients who had diversity in terms of the products that they use, and they have different nature of operations.
Mm.
So to mitigate the risk of understanding how these products are used, financial firms or NBFCs and even HFCs have a thing called as AML and KYC. KYC stands for Know Your Customer, and AML stands for Anti-Money Laundering.
Yeah.
So I started my career in there. So coming from a quantitative background, I started developing, quantitative models for them to capture, how risk can be mitigated out there
Yeah.
through the, usage of the products.
Yeah.
And I think I spent about 6 months with them in the KYC AML quantitative model development. And then I got a fantastic opportunity to move at the corporate and investment banking side, where I was a part of the coverage team. So coverage is basically if you need a credit underwriting from us, or you need a kind of a corporate finance product, then I come into the picture, help you understand your business better, how this product can be used, and what are you looking up to, what valuation can I give it to you better. So that's how I started my career at JP Morgan Chase. And after that stint, I got an opportunity to work with Morgan Stanley in India. And coming from a risk background, I joined them into wealth management, risk as an risk advisor. So my job at the firm in the current capacity includes understanding, how different clientels. So I majorly look into, individual who are HNIs and UHNIs, which is high net worth individuals and ultra high net worth individuals and families and trusts and different organizations to invest their money and help them understand how risk is a part of their investment and how it would be mitigated further. So that is my current profile that I work for. I've been working for this profile for about 3 years.
Wow. Okay. I think younger people than you would be interested in knowing why you decided to take a job right after your bachelor's, why you decided to take a corporate job. And I think the third question is how long are the work hours after this suicide in EY? How is it for you? Okay, so those are the three questions that I think it'll be worth listening to you. Personal,
Yeah.
don't say, look, this is a theory. Just tell us for your own self, what was it that after
So
you okay,
my understanding,
go ahead.
yeah. So my understanding of why I needed a job after my bachelor's was that I graduated when the COVID was prevalent across the globe. And I did see a prospect in there for me, trying to kind of experiment in my career, not go for my post graduation and lead towards developing my skills further, but to test them out, because it was just a trial and error, right? So, so a lot of companies in Indian colleges, it's a trend that a lot of companies do come into your campus to hire you at the end of your, kind of course. So, when I was interviewed, so I got multiple offers from different companies. But what interested me most was to test out my quantitative skills, which JP Morgan was the only firm offering it to me in their, model development business. So I joined in there. And at the same time, I did even clear my CFA level one. Further to which I understood that, financial advisory is something that I do not want to get into completely, but I want to get, involved in risk, which is, the upcoming and the most prominent thing in the entire world for the banking institutions across the globe. Then, so that's why I took up the job at JP Morgan, and second thing is why I did not, do my masters yet, is answered in the self manner. But why risk is very interesting because when I joined the firm back in 2021, so I realized we talk about banking in terms of more of sales, right? More of advisory. But what happens behind the walls? How is it all curated? How does it all come together? There are a lot of moving components in there, right? And every component has its own risk that it carry forwards. And as the kind of a thing we have seen, there's a major relapse that happened in 2008, right? The economic crisis, the banking crisis. So that got me interested. So I started reading up a lot on that. I read a lot of tax reform laws in the US, in the Europe, in India, and how the governments are becoming, or the institutions are becoming more interested in securing themselves rather than selling themselves in the market, because selling keeps on happening. Selling is a requirement of the industry, of the economy. So selling does not get hampered anywhere. What hampers is that how much are you able to protect yourself, and have a on going on basis concern, how much are you well able to capture that and secure that in the future. So yeah, so those three questions are answered. So I'll take you further ahead about my growth journey and what I look up to in this particular way.
No,
So,
you didn't talk about work hours.
Yeah, the work hours. So work hours are pretty extensive, but it all depends. Sometimes it's just so I majorly work from 11 in the morning to 8 in the night. But then there are few days, for example, now it's the month of October, so the year end is coming a bit closer to us. So we have a lot of audits that keep on happening every quarter, mid-year, and then year end. So year end audits are a bit more consuming. So hence we might need to work on a bit of extensive basis. So if I work like 9 hours a day, generally across the year end I work around 12 to 13 hours a day.
But
But that's fine.
5 days, 6 days, 7 days. How many days a week is that?
Oh, that's 5 days. So I prefer working from my home, given the flexibility of work from home options after COVID. So I prefer working from Monday to Wednesday in the office physically, and Thursday and Fridays are the days that I opt to be at home and work from there, because I have client meetings that go on for very long, and even the stakeholders meeting. So that gives me a bit more of comfort and flexibility at the same time.
Wonderful. Please continue.
Yeah.
So continue.
So,
yeah.
right. So when I've been put into this kind of a frame, how to explain about the things, what comes into my mind the most is, what does India want next, right? So I'm not an advocate of other industries working in India, but I will do understand about the manufacturing sector and the banking sector, because I come from a background of manufacturing sector as a family who's been invested into that, and banking because I chose for it. Uh, so, there's this trend nowadays, what to do. Like you asked me a question like, Yash, why did you not pursue your MBA? Because, my mentors who I've been in touch with, they say MBA is a gone theory now, because the markets are more about what skill do you carry. Like if you're an analyst, for example, an analyst, every analyst can have their own opinion to sort out things, to have an understanding and boil down and deep down to different things, right? But then what is the content that you want to curate in your analysis is what really matters. So somebody who has a given exposure of understanding of a skill set, let's say who's in the initial years of graduation, would be an equally placed person in the corporate when it comes to comparing them with an MBA, let's say, right? Or might be a guy from a master's degree of a different discipline altogether, right? So this is one thing that I've been, getting a lot of a query about to understand. So what I realized in, the stint of my work till now, post my graduation, is that, you know, uh, the industry is evolving and changing now, and the requirements are too. So the attitude that the 90s had for the job seekers was to A, be very learned about the theoretical aspect. And once you get done with that, you come into the industry and take over and start experimenting. But now it has changed, because back in 1930s to 1950s, as India, we had a demand for an industrial revolution. So manufacturing was something very prominent. Manufacturing was something that did not happen without getting skilled, getting yourself equipped with certain skills to perform the job. So people did a lot of, their graduations into engineering and they went for those jobs. And that trend kept on, kind of dragging them, it till 1980s. But till the 80s, the scenario was more different.
Mm.
The scenario became more about automating the manufacturing sector, right? Because we were getting a lot of threat again from the Western world and the European world, right? That okay, we need to automate things. So people started upskilling themselves. That was the need of the hour. So the batch that started in 1940s, let's say, to 1980s, they became irrelevant because there was no understanding of the need of upskilling oneself, right? And that's how a major lag in the labor economics, if you understand, in the models. There's Weber model, there's Marxist model. So all of them talk about those lag, right, in the society, and those are created because the human input itself is not able to upskill themselves to the requirement of the hour, right? Then further to 80s to 90s, we moved a bit ahead from the manufacturing era. We came into the service era.
Mm.
And in service era, we see openings where banks had a majority of the roles to play given the 1991, liberalization and privatization policy of the Indian government, right? So a lot of foreign players started to show an interest in India. And there was a well articulated and trained labor force in India which was unused. So the supply was in excess to the demand, right? So there was 100% absorption. So the best part about being, in that era of 90s to early 2000s was that the service industry was ready to absorb you. And when that absorption happened, people found, very interesting to be in that phase of growth, right? The reason being that was the first time Indians evidenced something like having an international exposure. That is when people started demanding that exposure. Before that, nobody asked for it because they looked for it as a threat. But after that, they started, asking for it as an, experience that counts on their, profile. So as a result, the IT sector took over it. The banks took over it, and we saw something called as a radicalization of the service industry itself.
Yeah.
So people started moving outside of India. They started exploring the arenas and domains which were unknown and unheard about India, and it kind of become a taboo, right? Because there were stories that used to float around. Oh, I know someone who's in the States. I know someone who's in Australia. He's doing this kind of a work. He's doing that kind of a work. So people started having their own narratives of how the outside world looks like. So that interested more and more people, and I think the early 2000s are the uh, the generation of early 2000s are the one who understood. Okay,
Mm.
there's more to it.
Mm.
So getting that exposure, now let's start adding value to it. So because of that, a lot of changes that keep on happening. But if I put into a frame, so 1930s till 2010, let's say, was still the changes were, very evident in terms of being seen. People were feeling that change. They were understanding, what is happening, where I need to be, what's further ahead for me. But after 2010, a lot of things did change drastically. So it was very difficult for one to keep a touch about, what's going where to be, what should I do, what should I be, right? And that is the time period when I think most of the people understood the idea of freedom of thought.
Yeah.
Because now you have a lot of exposure that you could have got. And I think that was not there before, right? But the evolvement of the same was so fast and so finished that one cannot keep update on the same thing until unless. So it all boiled down to funnel where you had to select your niche area of understanding. So some people took it and in IT they started becoming a developers for software. Some people started becoming programmers to kind of service those softwares. Bankers
Yes.
became more efficient in terms of one product type. Industrials became more proficient in terms of handling one industry. And after 2010, if you see, when I talk about the industrial part to it,
Mm.
there hasn't been a single conglomerate in India or globally that has been able to prove their presence in the market.
Mm.
Because small companies that come in and they were starting disrupting this particular market. And fast forward to now, 2024, things have drastically changed. If you pick up anyone randomly, if you sample it, just try to identify a youth who's between the age of 16 to 20. The first thing that comes into their mind is, I want to do something innovative. So innovation might not just mean engineering. Innovation might just not mean being a doctor. It does not mean being a lawyer. So now the definition of innovation has changed for everyone, right? So when I work for a corporate as big as Morgan Stanley in India, so people ask me, Yash, why not do you work for an entity that is starting up as an NBFC? Because that is where the most of the learning happens,
Yes,
right?
just please explain NBFC to people. Not everybody knows this jargon.
Yeah. So NBFC stands for non-banking financial companies. So they don't have a similar working of a bank wherein you have deposits coming in and lending going out. So these financial companies are formed on the basis of providing a short-term lending, a personal lending, and they operate with a model of getting input from the capital, from equity, from private equity, from venture capitalists. They fund them. They provide a high-intensity loan out there in the market, and they revolve it around. As a result, we have consumer loans in India, right?
Yeah,
So again, that's something new that the world saw. So
yeah.
nobody could imagine buying a refrigerator or buying a TV or buying a consumer durable on an EMI basis. So EMI stands for easy monthly installments, right? So
Equal, equal,
yeah,
not
equal
easy.
monthly installments. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
So yeah, so the other part to it is in India how this whole EMIs was you can easily so you have easy monthly installments you can pay out on your ease. So
yeah,
that is how they marketed the EMI schemes in India.
yeah,
So yeah, so yeah, so now the thought process of understanding where do you want to land has completely changed the scenario of Indian youth
yeah,
trying to enter the job market. So like if I were to be an advocate in today's world. And I don't think that's an area that I want to be in, but law is something which is of interest to me. People started to have, multiple calibered professions at the same time. One which is being practiced and one which is passive. Because they had these domains of LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So someone who's, for example, if I'm a banker and I keep a lot of interest in terms of, let's say, labor laws in India, then I have a passive involvement by posting and researching about those things on these platforms. But at the same time, as a professional, I can be engaged to be a banker. This flexibility is something new that is seen by people, right? Hence, the dilemma of what I need to do, where I need to be, when I need to be, how can I be? These are the questions that are continuously, coming up in today's youth. So for that, I would say, you know, uh, I think I might not be that old to say this, but then I always look for great mentors.
okay.
So in the race to understand what I need to be, or how I need to be, people have forgotten the fact that mentorship is something that has really worked out for all the laureates in the world. Right? You need a guidance path. You need something to develop upon. You need to understand what are you signing up for, because a career is something that you don't build in a decade. It's over decades,
Mm.
right? Someone who's starting up at 25, let's say, he has 35 years to work until the official retirement age. So if I pick up something which is of an interest to me or relevant to the market or
Mm.
the society, or the economy for, let's say, a decade, that's not going to work out. What is going to work out for me is that is going to evolve over decades, yet the basic fundamental of it remains the same. So I think the growth and the learning models in the industry as a whole have reformed the law, right? People have started to make more of informed choices. They have started to have these mentors coming in who are helping them understand how it's done, right?
Hmm.
And another problem to the counterpart, the counterpart problem to this is situation is that people want to grow very fast, and that does not happen, because one skill acquired at a time takes you about 3 to 4 years to prove it, you know, that you have really polished upon it. But what people have understood is that if I upskill myself today, I'll reap the benefits right from where I, can get done with my, learning process for that skill.
Hmm.
And that is becoming a thing to make the new generation more impatient about things, which is good. I mean, always be hungry for more, but then understand where that hunger is coming from. Right? So not on a pessimistic side, I would be, you don't get everything that you ask for, but on an optimistic side, I would say you will get things when you ask for it.
Okay.
Had I not asked for things in my organization, I would have not grown.
Okay.
Right? But yeah, so that is one of the things. And the second part to that is that
Okay,
the
before you
turning
get on, yes, before you get into the second part, let me ask a question. What was it about your education that prepared you for all this? They didn't teach you all
sorry,
this.
I don't get that.
So what was it in your education that prepared you for the work that you are doing? What do you think was it there that helps you now?
Oh, okay, that way. So when I was doing my undergraduation, uh, the best part about the university that I studied in was it allows you to take a lot of electives, outside the discipline that you're pursuing. So in my first semester of my undergraduation, I did sign up for something called as industrial psychology, which was something which is not related to economics, which is something which is not related to finance, right? But then I did sign up for that. The beautiful thing about that subject was it taught me, how the labor thinks, how the capitalist thinks, and how the economy thinks, right? So the working integration of that is something that gave me an exposure and made me curious more. And hence I went ahead and I learned about things, from people who were not of my domain. Yet I made them mentors to make me understand, what it is all about. So that curiosity is something that sparks. And then in my second, I mean, all these consecutive semesters, I kept on taking a lot of disciplines which were outside of my discipline, right? My core discipline. And at the end, when I saw the potential of risk management in the world, I understood that, okay, you know what? There are things which are still explorative and people have not, heard about them. Like on a recent development, in 2017, I was following there's something called as field risk, which none of the banks had in place. So field risk is basically where all these financial advisors or the bankers who are working on behalf of the bank and representing them, they have to represent themselves in a particular norm.
Yeah.
And that is laid down by different institutions, right?
Yeah.
And if there's any violation to that, that's a risk for the bank, be it reputational, be it operational, be it financial.
Yeah.
So when I started to, learn about it more, in 2021, I got to understand that, the bank that I currently work for, the organization, is the first one globally to pivot into field risk management. So although I was hired for wealth management, I chose to go for field risk.
Okay.
In there, I understood that, how a behavioral aspect of a human as an advisor, even who's acting in the best interest of the bank itself, can be risky for the entity to further move ahead with it.
All right. Wonderful.
And that's just not, yeah.
So let's continue with
Yeah.
the
So,
point.
yeah, so please continue.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So that just not, affects the kind of continuity of education that I carried forward for this particular domain. But then it also proves that, things which are in the initial of the working, if you follow them from right there, you understand the impact that they're going to create on the job.
Okay.
And I think I got a good example of it myself living that.
All right. All right, let's continue, Yash.
Yeah. And the second most thing that I get asked about most of the time is, what after this, Yash? If not risk, if not, advisory, then what after that? Then I would say, you know, people have forgot how to make a living out of their hobbies, right? So if I spoke about, the age of my grandparents, their hobbies were something that carry forwarded their interests and wanted them to live more longer, even if they were not working, right? But in today's world, it's becoming so fast paced, right? That people are forgetting the essence of having a hobby at the side to develop, right? So, like, I have this hobby that whenever I get some free time, I jot down a lot of things from everywhere that I read about it. And after that, I try to, segregate it and keep it in there. And I try to find one person to talk about it and a niche down on it so that I can have a great interaction to understand, complete interaction to understand, right? And then I try to find real life examples out there in the world, how it's getting, true to itself. So I think a lot of people should, even focus about, their hobbies and their interests outside of work. And I think that gives you a sense of more fulfillment in your professional career. Because if you don't have things to do apart from your job, then I think, world depression is a thing that's becoming more prominent.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to add here?
Yeah. So since you yourself are a very well articulated and intellect economist sitting in front of me, so I know, one thing that I really feel needs to be fed out there to the society is that, things are going to evolve, things are going to change. There's going to be a lot of disruption, going to be a lot of development. But at the same time, what remains constant is the fundamentals of anything out there in the world, right? So people are focusing on how to be at pace with the developments, but a very few chunk of them are really still interested to know that, how the still fundamentals are being real in the current scenario. And I think that is the only determining factor of you being relevant at all these times. Right? Because if you aren't aware of the fundamental understanding, then no matter how much ever disruption happens or a revolution happens, you won't be the essence of that in that relevant, time period. And I think that is going to create a lot of change in the economic understanding of things as well, in the markets as well. Like if you see,
The fundamentals are very important. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
I-
Continue.
yeah. So I do second that. Fundamentals are something that are very important. Like I'll tell you, one of the best examples is we have all heard about these big companies, Kellogg's, Coca-Cola, there's PepsiCo out there, there's there's Hindustan Unilever, there's Britannia. All of these were a big conglomerate in India, and they had a huge market share, right? But what has happened post 2015 is people have understood the fundamentals of how a financial feasible model works with them, right? And hence people started to pivot into, manufacturing with the startup, ideology. As a result, what is happening now is, you know, earlier, I think early 2000s, I think 2018, big conglomerates like these used to think startups as to be one of the outliers in the market. They were not even a relevant competition to them. But now, if you look into it, they are becoming a threat because the market share is getting deviated. A, because they're giving better quality of products. They have better financial operating models. They know how the controls are working for costs and expenses. They know how the mentality and the psychology of the consumers is getting affected and changing over time, which if a conglomerate needs to understand or rethink about it, or they want to have a rollback on it, they need to invest a lot in their R&D, and that is because of the size that they have made themselves relevant in the market, right? But as for a startup, it can all happen within a room with three people in there.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. So, as an example, I was reading it about last week. Hindustan Unilever was India's biggest consumer durable company. They used to sell right from your toothbrush, your toothpaste, to your protein intake, breakfast supplements. They had everything being manufactured, right? But they have been losing the market share significantly, 0.78% every quarter since 2020. And that has gone impact reduction of about 12% of market share in the market,
Yeah.
right? But that 12% to build, they took about 60 years to build a heritage and a legacy, which got, driven out. The 12% of that got driven out in just 4 years. The reason being, they did not understand the need of the hour to innovate their products better, or how to sell them better, how to market them better. Whereas, these companies came in, the startup companies that came into the market, they started offering products. And, one of the attributes of demand is taste and preferences, right? So when people got, introduced to the new taste and preference about things which other people started offering in the market, the likeness of the products for HUL started moving out of the industry. As a result, they're losing a lot of market share. But they're so big in size, the HUL, they're big conglomerates, so they're big in size. For them to drive out the business completely empty is not possible, because that will take a lot of efforts by small entities to come together. You know, there has to be a concentration of power to dissolve it or disrupt it. But then a great example is such a big company losing its market share in such a less time. 4 years, nothing, because they took 70 years to build it. So, and as I started my, interview with you, so I told you, right, that upskilling is something that you need to keep on for individual. Similarly, for companies to have a fact on market in terms of how it's moving, what does it need? How are the requirements turning up? And to pivot on that, decision making is something that they are still missing in the market.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very good example as well for how youth is now overtaking people who have been experienced, right? So I do, advocate that fact strongly, that, the core and fundamentals are something that everyone needs to rework upon. If it's still the time you have your fundamental and core theories in process intact with you, I think the growth journey becomes really, really, fantastic without a hiccup in there. But if there is an untrueness or an unbindingness to any one of them, then it becomes a bit difficult to, be it a company, be it an institution, or be it an individual, to be on track with something called as relevance in there.
Right. Well, companies, well-established companies are failing all across the world because they cannot keep up with the change.
Right.
Companies that had market share for 100 years are failing because they're just outdated. They just cannot change themselves fast enough to the current situation. And the change is today so rapid, as you said, that you have to change all the time. You have to be able to do something and that you can't even imagine 2 years ago. So,
Right.
all right, good. That's a great lesson. Anything else you want to add here?
Yeah. So even, if you think about it, on a deep dive basis, there's another part to it, which is the socialistic structure that has changed for, the societies itself. So let's say my grandfather, he started up as a person whose father didn't have as many resources as my father has in the current time period to provide me with, right? So he started with something very less. So there was not, so 97% of Indian population did not have something called as generational wealth to start up with, right? So my grandfather, let's say, started up with, let's say, 100 rupees, right? His career started up with 100 rupees. He struggled and built resources that eased out my father to start it up at 1,000 rupees. right? So him taking the advantage of it, he further built upon resources for me to start up at, let's say, 10,000 rupees, right? And that wealth is now started to flow in the society. So I think current scenario, the labor in the market, they still do not feel that privilege of having that backing and the comfort
Mm,
level.
mm,
I know it's not something that you can generalize. It's
mm,
very subjective,
mhm.
but I'm talking about people who have been into the structured kind of a business and profession for a very long time, which is about let's say 80% of working population in India who are taxpayers, right? So if I want right now, I can go and buy a house for myself at a very young age, given the comfort that tomorrow, if my financial situation collapses by any chance, my father has created enough resource that I can rely upon, right? So
Yeah,
there's a fallback mechanism in that.
yeah,
Whereas for my father to think about in the same way was not possible because they were the maximum risk takers to build upon things.
yeah,
Hence, the psychology for my father to consume things would be very different. It would be more of a need versus want.
yeah,
Whereas for me, it will be more of a need is, for granted, but what is want is something that I want out
yeah,
there to
yeah,
provide myself.
yeah.
So I think that empowerment of financial hierarchy backing and generation well being built up in India has now started to kick in.
Okay.
People have started to understand that, right? As a result, if you see in the market these days, people are absorbing, practices and they are implementing those in the daily, day-to-day life. For example, my dad, if let's say he wanted to, his first priority after he started to earn was to get married, of course, and then second priority was to build a house, right? But in today's world, nobody wants to build a house before 45, 50 years of age because they have understood that the labor movement is so dynamic that tomorrow, if I have to change my city, right, then what? Then what happens to this fixed cost that I've kept in here? And the real estate is a fixed asset which is not going to give you a compounded interest over a period of time. There's going to be a relevance 5%, 10%, 15% growth. But if I start investing that into a financial platform and a market, it grows 200 folds, 300 folds, 400 folds. And my investment into real estate at 45 years of age would be still relevant because I'll have that corpus accumulated.
Right.
Whereas,
Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, and I'm losing that compound sensitivity to myself, right? To have that thought process being set up in one's mind, it took a lot for the society to observe and then grow.
Mm.
And I think today's youth is more, I would say, smarter, more informed, more knowledgeable than what people were before.
Yeah, I agree
Right.
completely.
Right.
It's true. I'm
So
100%.
yeah, so like I really like that about current generation that I'm a part of, and I think so the previous generation to us even sometimes takes on keeping a lot of kind of examples that we have set in as a thing to set at par with what they can do. Like you know they're very interested to learn about how Facebook works, how Instagram works. Why are people out there? Why are companies out there on Instagram and Facebook marketing their products in there? Right? They understood that how does e-marketing works, how does mega marketing works, right? So and they were amazed because they couldn't think about that, right? But if you catch hold of anyone who's a 16, 18, and 18 years old, he'll explain you the entire concept of how marketing is happening. Why are they sending out this post? Because they want you to buy it. But these platforms weren't there earlier. That is one thing that we have to understand. But then nobody even understood and thought about developing them till very late. So I think there was a big economical gap between the generation of 1980s to 2000s because the lag that was created for them was they wanted to have exposure out there and they were still exploring things. There was not anything which is definitive for them to be utilized, as a resource. So they lost a lot of years in doing that. And
Right.
I think Indian economy is one which is very prosperous in the current scenario. But if you look into the 1980s growth to 2000, The inclination of growth, was pretty steep in terms of its curve, but in terms of learning and innovation and development, it became really stranded.
Yeah.
It's only after 2000s that we started to face, kind of an extreme growth.
Okay. All right. Yes, we are kind of running out of time now. So could you wrap up, please?
Yeah, so I'm very humbled to have been called upon by you. So thanks a lot for the opportunity. And definitely, I know it was not a structured talk where I started with something, ended with something. It was a lot of things that we discussed. But I hope if anybody can, grasp anything out of this video, I'll be really feeling proud of that. And again, thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Okay, great to have you. I mean, honestly, it's good to see people like you in the financial sector, people who are passionate about it, people who understand it, because I think the financial sector still needs quite a lot of innovation in India. And maybe you are not yet ready to do it, but eventually you will be able to do it and you will do it. So I'm happy to see you there because, I wrote India 2047 3 years ago, and in it was a recommendation to the union government that your first priority is to develop the financial sector. People think their first priority is to develop villages, this or that. I said, listen, India is going nowhere without a better financial sector. We
Right.
need it because right now what happens is that without that sector being able to finance people who are not already privileged, the privileged become better off again somehow. And we need to finance
Right.
everybody, not just on a risk-adjusted basis. Of course, we need new channels, we need new work, and I'm glad you are there. And please think about it. Okay, so let's end it here at this time. I'll be back with another young person or an expert. Till then, bye everybody, and we'll talk offline a bit. Okay, thank you, Yash.
Yeah. Thank you.